In this chapter, we're going to look at different ways you can store your data in your Qt Quick application. We are going to look at two ways, settings and SQL mainly, but I want to bring it to your attention that you can do all kinds of crazy things from the C++ side and send the data to Qt Quick or QML using the available channels of communication between C++ and QML. We are not going to talk about how you communicate between C++ and QML because that's not the subject of this course, but I am planning to do a course about that, so stay tuned if you need to know more about this subject. So a takeaway is that we are going to look at settings and SQL. There is a QML type that is called settings that you use to save your data. We're going to look at that. But the first thing you have to do when using it, you have to set the information for your application, and you usually do that in your main.cpp file, and you do it like this. You have a QGUI application class that you instantiate, and inside you put your organization name, organization domain, and application name. So for different applications, this information should be different. This is the first thing you want to do when you are working with settings. Don't forget this. After that, you have to import Qt Labs settings. So to use this thing, you define a settings component in your QML file like this, and then you pass in the data that you want to save using property aliases like this. Okay, in this case, we are saving location data for a window. We want to save the X coordinate, the Y coordinate, the width and height information, and we save that like this. And when you do this, you don't need to do anything else. Your data is automatically saved and loaded. I know this might not make sense yet, but we are going to do a full demo about this, and you are going to see this in action. You can also split your settings in categories like this. You see we have a category to save window data, and we have a category to save color data like this. You can split your settings into categories. This is how you do it if you want to save your setting automatically. There is another way if you don't want to save the data automatically. Saving the data automatically imposes a cost on you of saving the data whenever something changes. So whenever I move the window or whenever this color changes, we are going to save it. And sometimes this can be heavy in terms of performance. If you don't want this, you can use custom settings. And what this allows you to do is to save the data whenever you want. The way you do that, you define a settings component like this. You put in the property that you want to save. Okay, and you give it a default value like this. You see Spring here is a default value. In this case, we are trying to save state data. We looked at states and transitions in the last chapter, if you remember. We are trying to save the Spring state in one of the demos that we did. After you define your settings component, you have to feed the property in your application. Your application has to read the property from the settings component here. And this is what we are doing. The state of our rectangle is coming from the settings component. And whenever the state changes in your application, you update the state here. And after you do that, you have to decide on when to save your data. In this case, we are saving the data when the component dies, but you can do it whenever you want. For example, you can do it when a user presses a button or wherever really in your QML application. Okay, settings is one way to save your data. But we can also use an embedded SQLite database that is going to be on your computer. To use that, you have to import Qt Quick Local Storage 2.0. This is what we have at the time of recording this video. The database is already available on your system, so you don't need to set it up or connect to it. You just need to create and manage your databases and tables, and we're going to do that in a moment. You're going to see exactly how this works. Okay, here we see the table that we're going to design for in our demo. We want to save location data and color data, the same thing we did with settings, but we are saving that as a JSON object in a table that we're going to define. The table is going to have two fields, the name of the setting that we want to save and the value of that setting. We try to make things very simple for you to understand, but if you know SQLite, you can quickly see that you can use this to do all kinds of crazy things. We're not going to cover SQLite in this lecture. You have to consult other pieces of documentation for that, but it is not very difficult to understand. Here you see that you can also show the location of the database on your system. It really is a file that you're going to find, and you're going to see this in a demo that we're going to do. Okay, this is how you connect to the database and create your tables. You say local storage, open database sync, you pass in the identifier for the database, you pass in the version, you pass in the description, and you pass in the estimated size of the database. After that, you can do transactions on your database. For example, here we are executing a query to create a table. The table name is this, and these are the fields that we have. When you have your database and your tables, the next thing you usually want to do is to stuff in some data. Here I have shown a simple function that we created in our demo to store some data. We are checking to see if the database exists. If it doesn't exist, we return, and we do a transaction to store the data. We want to see that we have our value in the table. So we are selecting everything from SQLite demo table where the name equals SQLite demo. Remember that our table has a field called SQLite demo. This is what we are checking for. Here we are preparing the data that we want to save in our database. Okay, we are stuffing the data from our UI component. You see we are capturing X, Y, width, and height information, and we capture the components of the color that we want to save, and we save that in our JSON object here. Next, we look at the result. If we got one result, it means that we had something in our table, and we update. We don't want to put in something new. That's why our transaction here is update. We update the table, and we want to set the value where the name equals SQLite demo, and we want to put in our JSON object that we created. We are just stringifying it. If we don't have the element already, we insert in the database and we put it in like this. This is really plain SQLite knowledge, so if you are rusty on that, you should read on that. You're going to understand these queries that we are passing in here. This thing you have in brackets like this replaces what you have with these question marks. This is the only thing that is special here. Okay, this is how you store data. We're going to do that in a demo. If you don't understand this yet, please don't worry. And this is how you read the data. You also check to see if the database is there. You have a transaction here. Inside, you want to execute this SQL query. We want to select everything. We really are doing the same thing. If we have a result, we want to capture the value in that result. Okay, this is how you capture it. We parse the JSON in the value that we got, and then we read the data. Okay, this is a JSON object that we have in OBJ. So we capture the data that we want, and we put that in our UI components, X, Y, width, height, and we construct our color from the components like this. This method, RGBA, is available in our Qt global object, as we have seen before. And everything we've talked about here is documented in the local storage documentation, either online or in Qt Creator. We're going to go to Qt Creator and look at that. Okay, here we are in Qt Creator. If you go to the documentation and type in local storage, like this, you're going to find Qt Quick Local Storage. Click on that and you are going to fall here. And they say that this is a singleton for reading and writing SQLite databases. If you click on this, they tell you what the SQLite environment they have is made of. They show you the methods that you can call open database. They really tell you everything we just talked about and even more. So if you are in doubt about something, this is what you should read. Down here, they also have an example that you can look at. I do recommend to look at this later when you are finished with this course, because it is a good way to practice your knowledge. Okay, this is all we're going to look at in this chapter. We're going to look at settings, and we are going to look at how you work with SQLite in your QML application. In the next lecture, we're going to look at settings. I'll see you there.